Here's your discharge button, your honorable discharge, and an envelope to keep it in.
Thank you, sir. And a wallet found at the scene. They know a soldier most likely did it.
Crossfire didn't play by the rules. It tackled a subject Hollywood wouldn't touch. It was shot in 22 days, with a budget most films would laugh at. And one scene, just 5 minutes long, got rewritten the night before because the studio was terrified. These are 20 weird facts about Crossfire. And the bonus? The actor who delivered the film's most chilling performance hated what his character stood for so much. He cried after every take. This one cuts deep. Number 1. Before Crossfire was a groundbreaking film about hatred, it was a novel about something even more dangerous to discuss. Richard Brooks wrote The Brick Foxhole in 1945, and in his original story, the murder victim wasn't Jewish. He was gay, a soldier beaten to death because of who he loved, not what he believed. It was raw, urgent, and completely impossible to film in 1947. The production code wouldn't allow it, not even close. So, producer Adrian Scott and director Edward Dmytryk made a choice. They kept the rage, kept the violence, kept the message about prejudice and hatred, but changed the victim. They made him Jewish instead. It wasn't a compromise born from cowardice. It was strategy. Anti-Semitism was something they could actually get past the censors, especially with the world still reeling from the Holocaust. The film could breathe, could exist, could say something that mattered. But here's what haunts the story. Decades later, Richard Brooks admitted he wished they'd fought harder. He understood why they changed it, but he never stopped thinking about the story he couldn't tell. Crossfire became a landmark film about bigotry, but underneath it, there was always a ghost. The story of a man killed for love, not faith. A story that would take Hollywood another 40 years to even attempt.
But in the case of Crossfire, final decision was postponed.
Number 2. Most films get months of prep, weeks of rehearsal, studio backing, and careful planning. Crossfire got none of that. Producer Adrian Scott pitched the project to RKO with one goal: make it fast and make it cheap. The studio gave him 22 days to shoot, and a budget so low, it barely covered the lighting equipment. 22 days for a film dealing with murder, moral complexity, and the darkest corners of human prejudice. Other noir films of the era took twice as long, but Scott wasn't worried. He assembled a crew that moved like a SWAT team. Director Edward Dmytryk had cut his teeth on B-movies where speed was survival. Cinematographer J. Roy Hunt knew how to light a scene in minutes, not hours. And the cast? Robert Ryan, Robert Mitchum, Robert Young. All professionals who didn't waste time. They showed up, hit their marks, and delivered. No rehearsals. No second takes unless absolutely necessary. Dmytryk later said, "The pressure made everyone sharper. There was no room for ego, no space for hesitation. You either nailed the scene or you moved on. What could have been a disaster turned into an advantage. The film feels urgent because it was made urgently. Every frame carries tension, because the people making it were racing against the clock. And when it wrapped on schedule, the studio couldn't believe it. Neither could the crew. They'd just made a masterpiece in 3 weeks."
Stars like Robert Young, Robert Mitchum.
Number 3. Robert Ryan was the perfect villain. Tall, intense, with a face that could shift from charming to menacing in a heartbeat. He brought a quiet rage to the role of Montgomery, the anti-Semitic soldier who kills a man in a drunken, hate-fueled attack. On screen, he was chilling. Off screen, he was devastated. Ryan wasn't playing a character. He was confronting something that sickened him. In real life, Robert Ryan was a lifelong progressive, a vocal advocate for civil rights, and a man who despised bigotry in all its forms. He'd grown up around prejudice and spent his adult life fighting it. So, when Dmytryk offered him the role of Montgomery, Ryan hesitated. He didn't want to become the face of hatred, but Dmytryk convinced him. If you don't play him real, if you don't make people see themselves in him, the whole film fails, he said. Ryan agreed, and then he suffered for it. After intense scenes, he'd walk off set in silence, sometimes visibly shaking. Crew members said he cried more than once. He told friends the role haunted him, that playing Montgomery felt like letting poison into his body. But he never backed down. He gave the performance everything because he understood the stakes. Hate had to be shown for what it was: human, ugly, and dangerously ordinary. Ryan's work in Crossfire became one of the most powerful villain performances in film history. Not because he enjoyed it, because it destroyed him. Number 4. Gloria Graham didn't have much screen time, maybe 10 minutes total. But every second she was on screen, the film shifted. She played Ginny, a lonely woman caught in the wrong place at the wrong time, delivering lines with a vulnerability that felt almost too real. And there was a reason for that. Graham was living through her own nightmare. During the production of Crossfire, her marriage to director Nicholas Ray was falling apart. They'd married young, and by 1947, it was collapsing in slow motion. She'd show up to set exhausted, emotionally raw, barely holding it together. Dmytryk noticed. Instead of pushing her to perform, he used what she was feeling. He told her to bring the sadness, the loneliness, the exhaustion into Ginny. Don't act it, just be it. So she did. In her most famous scene, where she talks about wanting someone to notice her, to care, you can hear it in her voice. It's not a performance, it's confession. And when the film wrapped, Graham went home to a marriage that was already over. She'd later say Crossfire was one of the hardest shoots of her career, not because of the work, but because of what she was carrying inside. But that pain, that honesty, it made Ginny unforgettable. A woman who appears for just a few minutes, but leaves a mark that lasts the entire film. Because sometimes the best performances come from the worst moments in life. Number 5. Film noir is famous for its shadows. Dark alleys, Venetian blinds casting stripes across faces, cigarette smoke hanging in low light. But Crossfire took it further. Cinematographer J. Roy Hunt didn't just use darkness, he weaponized it. He wanted the audience to feel trapped, suffocated, like the hate in the story was closing in from every angle. So, he did something radical. He underlit almost every scene. Faces disappeared into blackness. Entire rooms existed in silhouette. Some shots were so dark the actors couldn't see each other. Robert Mitchum later joked that half the film was shot in total blindness. They'd walk into frame, deliver their lines, and hope they were looking in the right direction. The studio hated it. Executives watched the dailies and panicked. They said audiences wouldn't be able to see what was happening. Too dark, too risky, too weird. But Dmytryk refused to change it. He told them, "This is a movie about hatred. Hatred lives in the dark," and he was right. When Crossfire hit theaters, critics praised the visuals as some of the most striking in film noir history. The shadows weren't just atmosphere, they were character. They represented the ugliness lurking beneath the surface, the violence hiding in plain sight, and Hunt's gamble paid off. The film was nominated for an Academy Award for Best Cinematography, not in spite of the darkness, because of it. Sometimes you have to risk everything to show the truth. And in Crossfire, the truth lived in the shadows.
Enthusiasm and excitement are the words which best describe the feeling of all.
Number 6. Robert Mitchum was already a star by the time Crossfire went into production. He'd made a name playing tough guys, drifters, men who didn't ask permission. But on this set, he did something unexpected. He became the mediator. The shoot was tense. Everyone knew they were making something dangerous, something that could get them blacklisted or worse. The director was under constant pressure. The budget was suffocating. And Robert Ryan was emotionally shattered by his role. Tempers flared. People snapped. The set felt like a powder keg. And Mitchum, he just stayed calm. Between takes, he'd crack jokes, tell stories, diffuse tension before it exploded. When Ryan needed space after a hard scene, Mitchum would sit with him in silence, not saying a word, just being there. When the crew was falling behind schedule, Mitchum would nail his scenes in one take. No questions asked, no ego, just professionalism. Dmytryk later said, Mitchum saved the production more than once, not with his acting, though that was excellent, but with his presence. He kept everyone grounded. He reminded them why they were there. And when the film wrapped, Mitchum didn't take credit for any of it. He just moved on to the next job. That was his way. Show up, do the work, keep your head down. But the people who worked on Crossfire never forgot. They knew the film succeeded, partly because one man refused to let the chaos win. And that man was Mitchum. Number 7. The script for Crossfire was tight. Every line mattered. Every scene had purpose. But there was one monologue that almost didn't make it. Near the end of the film, Detective Finley, played by Robert Young, tells a story about his grandfather, an Irishman beaten to death in America simply for being Irish. It's a quiet moment, a pause in the investigation, and it's the emotional heart of the movie. Young delivers it with restraint, no melodrama, just truth. But the night before filming, studio executives called an emergency meeting. They wanted it cut. Too political, they said. Too on the nose. Too risky. Adrian Scott and Edward Dmytryk fought back. They argued the scene wasn't political. It was human. It was the whole point of the film. A reminder that hatred doesn't change, it just shifts targets. The meeting went past midnight. Voices were raised. Threats were made. Finally, the studio backed down. But with one condition. If test audiences didn't respond, it had to go. The next day, Young filmed the monologue in one take. No rehearsal. Just him, the camera, and the words. When the film screened for test audiences, the room went silent during that scene. Not a sound. Afterward, people talked about it more than anything else in the movie. It stayed. And decades later, it's still one of the most quoted moments in film noir, because sometimes the quietest scenes carry the loudest truth.
Final script of Crossfire was mimeographed and distributed to executives and departments.
Number 8. Edward Dmytryk wasn't supposed to direct Crossfire, at least not according to the studio. RKO wanted someone safer, more established, someone who wouldn't rock the boat with a film this controversial. They offered it to a handful of bigger names, all of whom turned it down. Too risky, too political, too likely to destroy a career. So, Adrian Scott went to bat for Dmytryk, his frequent collaborator, and a director who'd proven himself on low-budget noirs. Scott convinced the studio to take a chance, and Dmytryk grabbed it with both hands. He knew this was his shot, not just to make a good film, but to make a film that mattered, so he prepared like his life depended on it. He studied every frame of the novel. He worked with the actors for weeks before shooting, not in rehearsals, but in quiet conversations about character, about hate, about why this story needed to be told. And when the cameras rolled, Dmytryk ran the set like a general. Fast, efficient, no wasted motion. He didn't shout. He didn't need to. Everyone felt the urgency. What the studio saw as a risk became Dmytryk's masterpiece. The film earned him an Academy Award nomination for Best Director, and for a brief moment, he was untouchable. But that moment didn't last. A few years later, Dmytryk would be blacklisted, his career destroyed by the Hollywood witch hunts. But Crossfire, that stayed, a testament to what happens when a director refuses to play it safe. Number 9. The murder that drives the entire plot happens off-screen. You never see the victim. Joseph Samuels get beaten to death. You only see the aftermath, the body, the shadows, the guilt spreading through the men who were there. And that choice, that restraint, it was brilliant. Dmytryk knew that showing the violence would make it spectacle. Hiding it made it personal. The audience had to imagine it, and imagination is always more disturbing than reality. But that wasn't the only reason. The production code was watching. They'd already flagged the script as controversial. If Dmytryk showed graphic violence against a Jewish man, the film would never see a theater. So he worked around it. He focused on faces, on reactions, on the weight of guilt. The soldiers who were there, they can't escape what happened. It follows them like a ghost. And the detective, Finley, he sees it in their eyes before they even speak. The absence of the murder scene became the film's greatest strength, because Crossfire isn't about violence. It's about the rot that causes it, the hatred, the cowardice, the refusal to stand up. And by keeping the murder in the dark, Dmytryk forced the audience to confront that rot directly. No distractions, no escape, just the truth staring back at them, and that truth, it was unbearable. Number 10. By the time Crossfire wrapped, everyone knew they'd made something special, but no one knew if it would survive. The film tackled anti-Semitism at a time when Hollywood was terrified of controversy. The blacklist was already forming. Careers were being destroyed for far less. And yet, when Crossfire premiered in July 1947, it didn't just survive, it exploded. Critics called it one of the most important films of the decade. Audiences packed theaters, and at the Academy Awards, it earned 5 nominations: Best Picture, Best Director, Best Supporting Actor for Robert Ryan, Best Supporting Actress for Gloria Graham, and Best Screenplay. It didn't win any of them, Gentleman's Agreement, another film about anti-Semitism released the same year, swept the major categories instead. Some said Crossfire was too dark, too unflinching. Others believed the Academy wanted to reward the safer, more palatable version of the story. But here's what mattered. Crossfire proved something. You could make a film about hatred, about prejudice, about the ugliness hiding in plain sight, and people would show up. They would watch, they would listen, and maybe, just maybe, they would change. The nominations didn't define the film's legacy. The conversations it started did. And 75 years later, those conversations haven't stopped.
Sensational, terrific, and colossal to describe our
Number 11. The title almost wasn't Crossfire. The original novel was called The Brick Foxhole, a reference to military slang, but RKO hated it. Too obscure, too military, too hard to market. They wanted something that captured the film's tension, its violence, its sense of lives colliding in the worst possible way. A dozen titles were thrown around: Murder in the Shadows, The Hate Killers, Deadline at Dawn, all rejected. Then someone suggested Crossfire, simple, sharp, dangerous. It captured the idea of men caught in the line of fire, both literal and moral. Dmytryk loved it immediately. The studio wasn't convinced at first, but they couldn't come up with anything better. So, Crossfire it was. And it worked. The title became iconic, suggesting violence, conflict, and the rapid-fire pace of the film itself. Years later, Robert Mitchum joked that half the film's success came from that one-word title. People heard it and knew exactly what kind of movie they were walking into. No false advertising, no bait and switch. Just a promise of tension and darkness, delivered in full. And in a strange way, the title became prophetic. Because everyone involved in making Crossfire would soon find themselves in a different kind of crossfire. The political witch hunts, the blacklist, the paranoia that consumed Hollywood in the years after. But that storm was still coming. For now, they just had a name, and it was perfect. Number 12. Hey, pretty intense so far, right? If you're digging into the darkness with us, go ahead and hit like or subscribe, because what's coming next gets even wilder. We've got secret rewrites, a scene that nearly started a riot, and the moment the cast realized they'd made something that could end their careers. Trust me, you don't want to miss what happens next. Now, back to the shadows. Most noir films had a femme fatale, a dangerous woman who seduced, manipulated, and destroyed men. Crossfire didn't. Gloria Graham's Ginny wasn't dangerous, she was damaged. She wasn't trying to ruin anyone. She just wanted to be seen. And that subversion, that rejection of the typical noir formula, it made the film even more unsettling. Because in Crossfire, the real danger wasn't a beautiful woman. It was ordinary men with ordinary hate. The soldiers in the film looked like heroes. They'd fought in the war, served their country, earned respect. But underneath the uniforms, some of them carried poison. And the film forced audiences to confront that. Your neighbor could be Montgomery, your brother, your friend. Evil didn't need red horns and a pitchfork. It just needed an excuse and a dark room. Dmytryk later said that was the point. Strip away the glamour, the seduction, the classic noir tropes, and what's left? Just people. And sometimes people are the most terrifying thing of all. Crossfire didn't give you someone to blame from another world. It gave you a mirror, and most audiences didn't like what they saw. Number 13. The score for Crossfire was composed by Roy Webb, a prolific film composer who'd worked on dozens of RKO pictures. But for this film, he did something different. He stripped everything down. No sweeping orchestral movements, no romantic strings, no heroic brass, just tension. Low, rumbling bass notes that felt like a heartbeat. Sharp, sudden stabs of sound that made you jump. Silence that lasted just a little too long. Webb wanted the music to feel like dread, like something crawling under your skin. And he succeeded. In some scenes, there's almost no music at all. Just footsteps, breathing, the sound of a door closing. The absence of sound became its own kind of score. It made the violence feel more real, more immediate. There was no safety net of music to tell you how to feel. You were just there, in the room, watching it unfold. But here's the part most people don't know. Webb was terrified the studio would reject his approach. Executives wanted traditional film scoring, something to guide the audience, to soften the edges. Webb ignored them. He composed what the film needed, not what they wanted. And when Dmytryk heard the first cut with Webb's minimal score, he knew it was perfect. The studio complained, Webb didn't care, and when critics praised the film's haunting minimalist sound design, the complaints stopped. Sometimes the best music is the music you barely hear, just enough to remind you that something's wrong, something's coming, and there's nowhere to hide. Number 14. Robert Young seemed like an odd choice for a film noir detective. He was known for playing nice guys, wholesome characters, the kind of men who'd help you change a tire and never ask for anything in return. But that's exactly why Dmytryk wanted him. He wasn't Sam Spade or Philip Marlowe. He was tired, he'd seen too much, and he was trying to do the right thing in a world that didn't care. Young brought that exhaustion to the role without saying a word. You could see it in his eyes, in the way he moved, in the pauses between his lines. He wasn't performing weariness, he was embodying it. And there was a reason. Young was going through his own crisis during the shoot. His film career was stalling. He'd been typecast for years, and he knew Crossfire was his chance to break out, to show he could do more than smile and deliver safe, comfortable performances. So, he threw everything into Finley. Every scene, every line, every moment of quiet frustration. And it worked. Critics called it the best performance of his career. But Young never felt satisfied. He later said he carried Finley with him for months after filming ended. The character's sadness, his disillusionment, it seeped into Young's real life. He'd go home and couldn't shake it. The weight of playing a man fighting a losing battle against hate, it hollowed him out. Crossfire gave Robert Young the role of a lifetime, but it cost him something too. A piece of optimism he never quite got back. Number 15. There's a scene early in the film where the soldiers sit in a bar, drinking, laughing, trying to forget the war. It looks improvised, natural, like you're eavesdropping on real men having real conversations. And, in a way, you were. Dmytryk told the actors to stop performing. He wanted them to just be. So, before shooting that scene, he gave them an exercise. He sent them to a real bar, not in costume, not in character, just as themselves. He told them to drink, to talk, to remember what it felt like to come home from war and not know where you fit anymore. They spent hours there. Some of them got drunk. Some of them got emotional. And when they came back to set the next day, Dmytryk rolled cameras and told them to do it again. Same energy, same confusion, same pain. What ended up on screen wasn't acting. It was memory, and you can feel it. The laughter sounds hollow. The jokes don't quite land. The camaraderie feels forced, like they're all pretending to be okay when none of them are. That's the genius of Crossfire. It didn't ask its actors to pretend. It asked them to remember. And what they remembered was complicated, messy, and uncomfortably real. Because these weren't villains. They were men. Men trying to survive in a world that didn't make sense anymore. And some of them, like Montgomery, found hate easier than healing. Number 16. Paul Kelly played the role of a man who knows more than he's saying. He's not the killer, he's not the hero. He's just a soldier trying to stay out of it. And Kelly brought a lived-in quality to that cowardice. He'd spent time in prison in real life. In 1927, Kelly was convicted of manslaughter after killing his best friend in a drunken fight over a woman. He served 2 years in San Quentin, and when he got out, Hollywood didn't want him. He was blacklisted before blacklists were official. He spent years clawing his way back, taking small roles, rebuilding his reputation one film at a time. By the time Crossfire came around, Kelly had something most actors didn't. Real guilt, real shame, real understanding of what it meant to live with blood on your hands. And he poured all of it into his performance. His character doesn't say much. He doesn't need to. You can see everything in his face, the fear, the complicity, the desperate hope that if he stays quiet, maybe he can pretend it never happened. Dmytryk cast Kelly specifically because of his past. He wanted someone who understood what it meant to be haunted. And Kelly delivered. He didn't steal scenes, he haunted them. And when the film ended, Kelly went back to small roles, never quite escaping his own history. But for one film, for one performance, he showed the world what guilt really looks like. And it was devastating. Number 17. The film's climax happens in near darkness. Montgomery is cornered, trapped, and Finley closes in. It's tense, claustrophobic, and it almost didn't happen. The scene was originally written to take place in daylight, outside, with backup officers and clear sight lines. A traditional shootout. But Dmytryk hated it. He told Adrian Scott it felt too clean, too Hollywood. If Montgomery was going down, it had to feel ugly, desperate, trapped, like a rat in a corner. So Dmytryk rewrote it the night before shooting. He moved the confrontation indoors, cut the backup, stripped it down to just two men in a dark room, one trying to escape, one refusing to let him. The studio panicked. They said it was too risky, too unconventional. What if audiences didn't understand what was happening? Dmytryk didn't care. He shot it his way. And when the scene was cut together, even the skeptics admitted it worked. The darkness made you lean forward. The silence made every sound matter. And when the gun finally fires, it's not triumphant. It's just sad. A waste. A life ended not in glory, but in shadow. Years later, Dmytryk said that scene was the most important in the film. Not because of the action, because it showed that defeating hate doesn't feel like winning. It just feels like survival, and sometimes that's all you get. Number 18. Crossfire was released in July 1947. Just 3 months later, the House Un-American Activities Committee launched its investigation into communist influence in Hollywood. The witch hunts had begun, and Crossfire, a film about prejudice and mob mentality, became a target. Adrian Scott was called to testify. So was Edward Dmytryk. Both refused to name names. Both were blacklisted. Scott never directed again. Dmytryk eventually cracked, testified, gave names, and was allowed back. But the damage was done. The very film that warned against hatred and scapegoating became ammunition for the people it was criticizing. Conservatives called it communist propaganda. They said it was trying to divide America, to weaken patriotism, to make soldiers look bad. They missed the point entirely. Or maybe they didn't. Maybe they understood exactly what Crossfire was saying, and that's why they wanted it buried. Because the film wasn't about communism. It was about power, about how easy it is to turn people against each other, how hate spreads when good people stay silent. And in 1947, with the blacklist closing in, those lessons became dangerous. The people who made Crossfire paid the price. Some lost their careers, some lost their homes. Some were never the same. But the film survived. And decades later, when the blacklist was finally recognized as the shameful chapter it was, Crossfire stood as evidence. A film made by people who refused to stay silent, even when it cost them everything. Number 19. The film ends with Finley walking away. No celebration, no sense of victory, just a man who did his job and knows it won't change anything. Montgomery's dead. The case is closed, but the hate, that's still out there. And that ambiguous, melancholy ending almost got cut. Test audiences didn't like it. They wanted closure. They wanted to feel good. They wanted Finley to make a speech about justice prevailing, about how this could never happen again. But Dmytryk refused. He told the studio, "If we lie to them now, we've wasted 2 hours of their time." So the ending stayed. Finley walks, the camera holds, and then it fades to black. No music, no final message, just silence. And audiences sat in that silence, unsure how to feel. Some walked out angry, some walked out thinking. But no one walked out unchanged, because Crossfire didn't promise easy answers. It didn't promise that fighting hate would make you a hero. It just promised the fight was necessary, even when it's hard, even when it hurts, even when it feels like you're screaming into the void. That ending became one of the most debated in film noir history. Some critics hated it. Others called it perfect. But everyone agreed on one thing. You couldn't forget it. And maybe that was the point. Don't let you feel good. Make you feel something. And force you to carry it with you when you leave. Number 20. Most classic films get restored, re-released, celebrated with anniversaries and retrospectives. Crossfire didn't. For decades, it was hard to find. Not because it was forgotten, but because it was uncomfortable. Studios didn't want to promote a film about anti-Semitism. Theaters didn't want to screen something so dark. And by the 1960s and 70s, when film preservation became a priority, Crossfire was seen as a relic. Important, sure, but not something people wanted to revisit. So it faded, prints degraded, negatives sat in vaults, and a new generation grew up never seeing it. It wasn't until the 1990s, when film scholars started re-examining noir and the blacklist era, that Crossfire was rediscovered. They found the original negatives, restored them, and screened the film at festivals. and audiences were stunned. How had this film been buried? How had something this powerful, this relevant, been allowed to disappear? The answer was simple. Crossfire made people uncomfortable. It still does. Because the hate it depicts didn't die in 1947. It just changed clothes. And watching the film today, you realize how little has changed. The faces are different. The targets shift. But the mechanism, the way ordinary people turn into monsters when given permission, that's timeless. And maybe that's why Crossfire was buried for so long. Not because it wasn't good, because it was too good, too true, too unwilling to let anyone off the hook.